Hi, this is Rhythm Shift and welcome to my channel, or welcome back to my channel if you've been here before. This is where I do my toy reviews, and today I'm going to be taking a look at the Super 7 Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Ultimates Leonardo figure. Now, I'll put this out there. Out of all the Ninja Turtles, Leonardo was always my favourite. So naturally this is a figure that I was going to be looking forward to. Why do I like Leonardo? I don't know, I guess usually when it comes to cartoons or entertainment things, I generally tend to like the leader characters. They tend to be my favourite characters. For example, let's see, in the real Ghostbusters, Peter Venkman was my favourite. You know, he's the leader character. In Transformers, my two favourite Autobots are Optimus Prime and Rodimus Prime. You know, the leader characters. In Centurions, I used to like Ace McCloud. I think he was the leader in that, if I remember correctly. What other things is there? Yeah, I mean, sorry, they just jump out of my head. You know, in Masters of the Universe, He-Man was the leader, I suppose, of the heroic warriors. He was a favourite of mine. So yeah, I generally tend to like leader characters. In G.I. Joe, I'm a big fan of Flint. I know he wasn't the leader himself, he was third in command under Duke and General Hawk, but you know, generally speaking, I tend to like the leader characters. I just find them very appealing. But then also, you know, blue's my favourite colour. Leonardo wears blue, and also his weapon of choice was the two katana blades. So I just thought all three of those factors combined made Leonardo my favourite. Although I do love all the turtles, they do, you know what I mean, you got to love them all, you know, because they do make a complete team. Yeah, Leonardo was my guy. So here's the box. He comes on the brown standard shipping container box. Nothing much to see. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle logo there. On the back, a little bit of write up. Super 7, Nickelodeon, don't choke. You know, pretty simple, but it keeps the figure inside protected. So let's get him outside this brown shipping box. So outside of that box you get this, which is pretty standard. You get the plastic bag which covers the box itself. Now you have Leonardo's face on the sewer lid type manhole cover thing. You've got his two katana blades there, and his face has the same I suppose you could call it Bell's palsy these days, but he's got the same sort of, you know, half grinning face, which shows his left side of his teeth. And on the back it says, let's take this out of the bag. He has the green colour, which is the colour for the hero characters. And it says Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the vintage 80s toy line or cartoon logo. So outside the slip case, not slipping case, well, it's slipping now that I'm taking it off, but here you have my favourite turtle, Leonardo, and he looks great. He looks really, really cool, man. I think the update to the vintage head sculpt is right on the money. That's exactly how I wanted Leo to look. I mean, his head was a little bit weird in the vintage toy line, you know, but I think they've given it a nice roundness to it, rather than it looking a bit pinched at the bottom, you know, because his head kind of, his sideways profile, his vintage toy head looked a little bit squashed, but it was okay. I mean, it's fine. I enjoyed it back in the day, but yeah, as you can see, it comes with two turtle comms, pizza, Indian, fist dagger, Karma, two shuriken, two swords, but they're not katanas. Once I get them out of the box, I'll point out that they're more like samurai swords than katanas. Now, I'm not an expert when it comes to swords, but I don't think katanas are supposed to be. I don't think katanas are supposed to be so long and curved, because in the vintage toy line they're very straight and angular. But we'll get to that. And he also has an extra head. So that's pretty cool, and these accessories seem to be quite well secured in the box, because if you're a mint on card collector, when I was reviewing Wave 3, forgive me. When I was reviewing Wave 3, I found that on Rocksteady and Michelangelo, some of the accessories were falling around inside the tray, which means that if you're a mint on card collector, you have to open the box to put them back in, which is kind of defeating the purpose. So thankfully that doesn't happen here. I'm not a mint on card collector, so I don't care, but for those who are, I can empathise. So on the back of the box you get a little bio, and as I've said before, unfortunately they don't include the full bio that the vintage toys had. They only just include a part of it. So factors such as Leonardo's age, the strength of his shell, his height, they're not included, frustratingly. But let me see if I can recall from memory. From memory, I think Leonardo is supposed to be 16 years old. Yeah, that's right. Leonardo is supposed to be 16. And his shell is supposed to be bulletproof, if I'm not mistaken. Leonardo's shell was bulletproof. Donatello's shell was as hard as tank armor. Raphael's shell was hard as old chewing gum, and Michelangelo's was waxed to a polishy finish. Something along those lines. Forgive me, it's been years since I read those biographies, but or bio cards, file cards, whatever. But let's read what we've got here. It says Leonardo, the battle commander of the Turtles. Like his Florentine namesake, Leonardo is the perfect turtle. In the lidless eyes of his allies, he is known as the unofficial commander of the Turtles and Splinter's star pupil. Because of his keen eyesight and sensitive hearing, Leonardo is extremely well balanced, which makes him more skillful when wielding his ever-flashing katana blades. No matter how dangerous the situation, Leo doesn't mind sticking his neck out. His primary objective in life is to cut the shredder down to size. Now, that's a good bio, because for those of you who have read the Eastman and Laird original Turtle comics, the black and white ones, you can see they took a lot from that. A lot of influence from that, I should say, because obviously originally the Turtles is a much darker story in the original comic, and yeah, man, the Turtles got down, man. They weren't like the cartoon where they rarely ever used their weapons, or if they did use their weapons, it was against, robotic foot soldiers. In the original cartoon, man, the Turtles were getting down, and Leonardo was indeed cutting people down to size. So that's pretty impressive. So yeah, all in all, that's pretty cool. The box looks nice. The figure looks nice in the box. He's well protected. Not much more to say other than let's take him out of the box and get into the review of the toy itself. Okay, so here we have Leonardo out of the box, and first and foremost I'd like to start by giving the tail of the tape, as they say in boxing. So let's measure him. He stands at just over 6 inches tall, which is great because this is a 7-inch scale toy line, and as I've said before with my review of Michelangelo, the Ninja Turtles themselves, just drop something. The Ninja Turtles themselves are supposed to be around, I think, 5 foot. So next to a 7-inch figure, this scales very well. So I'll use an example. Let's use a figure here. I've got MK11 Johnny Cage here, and if I was to put him in the scene, that should be around about the height that the Ninja Turtles are supposed to be, because they're teenagers, remember. So Johnny Cage being a 7-inch figure, the Ninja Turtles scale very well with that toy line. So actually Johnny Cage is about 7.5, but nonetheless, I mean, it would scale very well with a 7-inch toy line, such as McFarlane's figures, be they Mortal Kombat or DCU, or even some Storm collectibles. I'll use another character here, just grabbing guys off my shelf. So if we were to put a Storm collectible, this is Kazuya Mishima. As you can see, again, the Ninja Turtle is roughly about the right height compared to a 7-inch figure. If Kazuya is a 7-inch adult, the Turtles are going to be like teenagers. So that's a really good scale there. So that's out of the way. Let's talk now about his articulation. Now, for those of you who have already watched my review of Michelangelo, the articulation is going to be pretty much the same. So you have a head which can look left and right, somewhat slightly up, and down. And I personally like that they can look up, because you can recreate the intro sequence from the 80s tune where they're flying out of the party wagon and, you know, going up and pulling out their weapons and that. That's quite cool. So you've got rotation at the shoulder, 360 there. You can move the shoulder out that way. You've got an upper bicep cut there. You've got a elbow bend, which is only single jointed, goes that far. You've got a rotation at the elbow, which, as I've said before, is a bit useless, but you can rotate the elbow without rotating the bicep. Why you'd want to do that, I don't know. His wrists, you get a couple of different wrists with him, but the ones I've got attached at the moment, they move in like that, so it's the inward and outward motion, like that. And on his, I've got the same on both hands. Now the reason why I chose this is because these hands actually, they look the same as the other ones, but these hands actually hold the swords a bit tighter, so that's why I put this type of hand in Leonardo, because these hold the swords just a little bit tighter. So after that, yeah, I've said you can rotate the wrist as well. Now from there, he has no ab crunch, but you can slightly turn his waist a little bit, like that. He can kick forward that far. That shell hinders his backward motion. He's got a knee bend, which is a single knee bend. I forgot to mention he has an upper thigh rotation as well. Knee bend, lower calf rotation, which makes no sense because you can't do that in real life. But you can bend his feet forward, and they can also pivot left and right. So that's the articulation for Leonardo, and to be honest, it's what's expected, because this follows the same mold that Raphael had, which was the first Ninja Turtle released in this Ultimates line. And all these figures are essentially is the same body, just with a different belt and a different head, which is kind of less than the change. There are fewer changes in these figures than there were on the 80s figures. On the 80s figures, they mixed and matched the forearms, mixed and matched the heads, and they mixed and matched the legs to make them all a little bit look a little bit unique. And also they gave them their individual colours. So on the back of the turtle, of Leonardo here, you can see it's the same shell they've used again, because all the cuts and scars are in the same place, which is same as it was on the original vintage 80s toy line, but the belt, as you can see, is different. Now there is a bit of a problem with Leonardo's belt in that, for some reason, I've heard that it's a factory error. You have these silver highlights on his belt around the L and around these sections here, which were not on the vintage toy. Let me get the vintage toy out to do that comparison. I have them right here. So here's my vintage Leonardo toy, and as you can see, the belt has no silver on it. So that was an addition, which is, I've heard talk that it was a factory error. But yeah, that's that. And there is also what was I going to say? Something else I've noticed about these turtles is that the vintage ones, they're very muscular. Like, you can really see the muscle definition on the arm there. And this is coming out of an era where, you know, action heroes were, I guess you had Arnold Schwarzenegger and Sylvester Stallone. That was the era of the action film, you know, 80s action film. So, and also coming from the Masters of the Universe era, where all the Masters of the Universe figures were hench. These Ninja Turtles shared a lot of those design aesthetics, so they had much more muscle definition. Now, as you can see the muscles are ripped on Leonardo here, vintage Leonardo. But on these newer Turtles, they don't seem to have really emphasized that same level of muscle definition, which is a bit weak, if you ask me. It makes the Turtles not look as strong. Like, you could really... They've sculpted the vein in there somewhat slightly, but the vein was so pronounced on the vintage toy. So you can see the vein on his muscles there, and the bulging biceps and the triceps. Everything's well defined. On the newer version, it's a lot softer, and I don't like that. I mean, if you're going to recreate the 80s toys and say you're bringing the 80s toys into the modern era, you really should take more design cues from those vintage toys, I think, personally. So putting Leonardo here, we're going to talk about his accessories, which is another area of contention for me. Let me get it. So before we go any further, let me get Leonardo's vintage swords. So the weapons that Leonardo, the newer version, comes with are two of these. I'll do all these weapons first, right? You get two katanas, like here. Now I'm going to talk about these more in a moment, because these look more like samurai swords than katanas. You get this kama, which is a standard weapon for the turtles. Fist dagger. I think one's an Indian fist dagger, if I remember correctly. Two shuriken, like so, which is great. You can see those there, shuriken. Now you also get, let me find these accessories. I had them a moment ago. Yeah, they are. Right, so he also comes with a few more parts, which are, just taking them out of the packaging. So he also comes with two turtle comms, one in the open mode, one in the closed mode, right? So two turtle comms. He comes with a slice of pizza, which looks pretty, I was going to say it looks pretty cheesy, but it looks pretty dirty compared to the other ones, but it's there. You know, how clean is your pizza gonna be when you're living in a sewer? You've got two star posing hands, great there. Two clenched fists, which is fine, but to be honest, I don't really need clenched fists for my turtles, because they kind of look like their fists are clenched enough for a punch anyway. Like if you was to throw a punch, I suppose the thumb's open, but it worked for me in the 80s. So, but hey, they've given us clenched fists for what it's worth. And you've also got two more sword holding hands, but rather than the hinge being this way, it's this way. So up and down hinge on these two hands. So that covers all his accessories. Now, what I want to do is talk a bit about the problem. So, they gave us these swords, and as you can see, now I'm no expert when it comes to swords, but this much I can tell. The swords have a long curve to them, which makes them look more like a samurai sword, whereas Leonardo is supposed to have katanas, which are straight. You see, this is a completely straight sword, and it's not as long. These swords are super long. Like, if you compare the length of this sword to the height of the figure, just do that. Length of sword to height of figure. Comes up to around about his shoulder. Let me hold it in a better position. This comes up to around about Leonardo's shoulder, okay? So if I take the vintage Leonardo, if he stands, he does indeed. It comes lower than his shoulder, and you've got to remember that this toy is in a crouch stance anyway, so let's put that there. It's about his shoulder, but my thumb's in the way. So there. Comes at about that high to the figure itself, but you've got to remember this figure's in a crouch stance. So if he used to be standing straight up, the sword would be about to his elbow maybe. But the fact of the matter is there's two faults with these swords that are included with this Ultimates Leonardo. First, they're too long. Secondly, they're too curved. If you're recreating the vintage toy line, why have you not recreated this sword correctly? It makes no logical sense. And this is something that really pisses me off, man. Like, how can you, if you've got a design brief, right, yeah, and you say, okay, these are the rules of our design brief. We're going to be recreating the vintage toys, excuse me, with modern articulation and modern sculpting technology, but yet you're making changes to the design which don't make any logical sense. These are not these. They're two different styles of sword. Now, I noticed that they're going to be bringing out the Sewer Samurai version of Leonardo in Wave 5. Now, that's a toy that I had in my childhood, and if I'm not mistaken, I think that's the very last Ninja Turtle toy I bought when I was a child, because I didn't like that figure at all, because I don't like the Ninja Turtles dressed up as sewer surfers and space cadets and rock stars and all that kind of bullshit, man. That to me isn't Ninja Turtles. I like the Ninja Turtles to be Ninja Turtles. So I kind of like the original designs, and I felt that once they started to stray away from the original concept it just became something else, man. It's like turtles dressed as, you know, Frankenstein, or turtles dressed as werewolf or whatever. You know, Universal Studio monsters. You got the troll turtles, all kind of madness turtles, which is all bullshit. It's all bullshit, and it all is basically just gimmicks to try and sell more toys. Which, at the end of the day, you got to remember that Playmates was a business, and they were trying to keep their head above water. But as a collector and as a fan of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, once they started to stray too far away from the original concept, it's the point when I lost interest in the whole thing altogether. So my thing is that if you're going to be recreating vintage toys, do it right. Now, the reason why I brought up Super Samurai Leonardo is because I believe in that toy they're going to be packaging the correct swords for this Leonardo, and I think that's BS. Why should I have to buy another figure which I don't particularly like, nor do I particularly want, in order to get the correct swords that I should have got in the first place? Fail, Super 7. Well, that's a big fail right there, and I'm not going to be buying, what do you call it, Super Samurai Leonardo, because, as I said, I didn't like that figure as a child, and I don't really want that figure in my collection as an adult. And this is the thing, I'm very selective about what I buy, and that's why sometimes it's cool to not be all in too much. I mean, to be honest, I couldn't be all in on many toy lines because I like so many of them. So I have to be selective about what I purchase and add to my collection. So just a little gripe. My thing is that Leonardo should have come with the correct swords that the vintage toy had. But that aside, let's keep going. So if I put the swords in his hand, you can see how they look. And they're very long, as I said. They're very long and they're very curved. But you've got to make the most of a bad situation. So that's how they look, you know. From the front, from the side, you can see they're that long. Now, as I said, these hands tend to hold the swords better than the other hands. They don't flop around so much in these. But still, I mean, it's like he's got two samurai swords rather than two katanas. Which is a bit annoying, man. It's kind of hard to overlook this when you kind of know what it should have been. But it is what it is, and he still looks alright. So, there's his swords. Let's see, they can store on his back, so if you take them out of his hands, you can store them on his back, and you slide them in. There's groove sections, so one's going to go under the other. You slide this one in here. Now, whenever I put the swords in these figures, I tend to do something which I always picked up from when I was a child. My brother told me this when I was a child, but basically he said, when you're putting the swords in, put them in so the blade is facing outwards. And I said, why would you do that? And he said, oh well, if he's going to pull the sword out in a hurry and he turns his neck, he'd end up slicing his own neck. So, for that reason, anytime I put swords in characters, I try to put them in the right way. But I think if you was to put them in the other way, it wouldn't work on this figure, would it? No, it does work. You can put them in that way. But, yeah, I don't really like that. I'll put them in the way, as I said, so that the non-sharp edge is facing his neck. Obviously, this is just my play pattern. Nobody else did the same as me. But even so, because the swords are so damn long... Oops, that's my phone. I should have turned that off. Even so, because the swords are so long, he'd end up slicing his ankles when he's running. Which, you know, again, maybe we have to overlook these things, because I guess when Eastman and Laird were designing these turtles, they didn't factor that in, I guess. But hey, it is what it is. And the swords fit well on his back. Now, from the front, they do seem to sit a little bit low. You know, let's do a comparison with Vintage Leo again. Because again, this is what the line's supposed to be based on, isn't it? So if I get both of his swords out. There we go. So you'll have to excuse me, his belt seems to have broken. I'll have to glue that back down at some point. But if you put the swords in, like they fit like that. They do sit roughly around the same height, I guess, on the vintage figure. But I don't know, it just didn't feel like they went down so low. I don't know, maybe it's a feel thing. But it seems to be relatively the same. But I think the feel feel factor comes in when you notice that these swords are just so long now. You know what I mean? They're just so long and so curved. It just doesn't, they don't look like Leo's sword should look. Anyway, I've made that point. Let's move on. So his other accessories, as I said, he gets a slice of pizza, which should in theory fit in the pizza box that came with Michelangelo. Let's see. Yep. So this piece of pizza will fit in Michelangelo's accessory here. But unfortunately the box does not close. But it's worth it if you want to do a... it's useful to have if you want to do dioramas from, say, maybe stages of Turtles, the arcade game, or Turtles in Time, because the pizza boxes represented the energy and boost, you know, pizza time. So that's kind of cool. Let's see how he holds the turtle comms. So he can actually hold the turtle comm in his hand. There you go. So that works well. You can be talking to the other turtles, or April, or Master Splinter. You could be communicating with the turtle comm, but he can't really hold it any closer to, well, he can actually. You can hold it about there, but you can't actually hold it like to his ear or anything like that. You just have to hold it like that, which is fine. It looks like he's using it. Other weapons, you know, the fist daggers. Again, he holds them reasonably well. It's a little loose, but you know, you can use that stabbing. The other one fits well. Let's check it out. Fist dagger, that fits very well. So there, you know, it can be stabbing and slicing and dicing his way through the Foot Clan with that. The Karma, it's hard to say Karma without thinking of Radiohead, but yeah, he holds that okay, but it's a little loose. It does slide down, which is a bit annoying. You know, with a bit of wobbling, it does tend to slide down. In the other hand, maybe it will hold it a little bit better. Nope, same problem. It slides down, which is annoying. All you got to do is make the handle a little bit thicker, and problems will be solved. But anyway, that's that. Shuriken wise, he can hold the shuriken very well, just like all the other turtles. So you can put it between his fingers like that, so you could go find the shuriken. Now what I love is that I've showed this before, you can put two shurikens in one hand, which I think is awesome. That looks like, yeah, he's about to throw some shuriken at the foot, so that's great. He does have one other accessory which I have not yet mentioned, and I should mention it. He also comes with another head, which is a more modern head sculpt, as you can see here. So just to show how he looks with the other head. There we go. So this head sculpt, I'm not really feeling it personally, because it makes it look like Leonardo has an egg head. The reason why I say he looks like he's got an egg head is because the bandana is not visible from the front, so you don't really get that. It's just the effect of a it's just the effect of an egghead, because the bandana is supposed to show, because when the bandana shows, it gives a better look to the figure, like, you know, the bandana is blowing in the wind. But because the bandana is set straight at the back of his head and flowing straight down, okay, you get the effect from the side, it looks okay, but from the front, nah, that just looks like who's got a bullet head? Charles Xavier. This is the Charles Xavier version of Leonardo. Not feeling it. So yeah, for me, it's vintage all the way. Now we're going to do a side-by-side comparison of these heads, because I think this modern head actually does improve on the way the vintage one looked in the profile. See, at the front, from first glance at front view, they look the same. But if we turn them to the side, the way that this vintage Leonardo's chin slopes down is very, like it slopes down, it doesn't look like he's got much of a chin. Whereas this one has more of a chin, so it doesn't look so squashed towards the bottom. So I think this really does improve Leonardo's look, I think personally. So I really like this new update on his head. Yeah, it just looks a little bit cooler. There, a little bit cooler. Now, one thing that I used to enjoy doing as a child, that unfortunately you can't do on these figures, is taking the turtles' belts off. So, for example, when I was playing, sometimes the turtles would be captured, and they'd take their weapons and their belts away, so the turtles had no weapons. And then they have to fight their way out of wherever it was they were being held hostage, or be rescued by another turtle or someone else, and then they get their belt and their weapons and accessories back and they can fight again. But you can't take these belts off these new figures, which is a bit of a nuisance, because that was an aspect of the play pattern you could have with the vintage toys. Now, another reason why that's a problem for me is because when I watched the 1990s TMNT movie, which I think is the only TMNT movie, that's the only one I really acknowledge, because that one was pretty good. The sequels are pretty shitty. Secret of the Ooze, and I didn't even watch Turtles, the third Turtles film. But the point is that Leonardo used to have his belt strapped somewhat like that. So I used to, and this is probably one of the reasons why it's broken actually, I used to mimic that strap pattern by putting it on this way to make it look like he did in the movie. And I do that sometimes with Donatello as well. But it was fun to be able to have the option to have it in the cross motion or the over one shoulder motion. It would go down like that. Yeah. So I put it on like that, just like in the 1990s movie. But you can't do that on this new figure at all, because the belts are non-removable. So that's a bit of a disappointment, I should say. But not that big a deal. But if you played with the toys back in the day, it might have been a factor for you as it was for me. So there's Leonardo. Let's put him back together. So there is something cool. You can have him where he's storing all of his weapons. So you can put the swords in his back, and you can do this with all three turtles so far, if you're creative. Put the swords in the back. The shuriken, rather than holding them in his hand, you can actually put them under the belt to store them. See, like that. So that's a pretty cool play thing you can do. I don't remember ever doing that on the vintage toys. I should try if you can actually do it on the vintage toy. So you can have him storing his shuriken like that, which is cool. Then if you lift up his arm, you can put this dagger in here, which is cool. Put his arm back down so he's holding that. Then on the right side you put this other one under here, if it should fit. There you go, under the arm there. Now you just position him like that. And now Leonardo is armed and ready for battle. One more weapon, that's the Karma. You can have him holding that in his hand. And then he's fully armed, ready for a mission. There you go, you've got a fully armed Leonardo. Now, I might put another hand in just to demonstrate how the other hands look. And there you go. There's Leonardo ready for war, as they say. Now let's put him on the rotation. There you go. So there's Leonardo, looking good in all his glory with all of his weapons. So let's do some comparisons. Just getting some figures out. Right. So we've already compared him to the vintage Leonardo toy. So I think it's good to compare him to some other TMNT Ultimates figures. I can actually sit down. Right. So let's do some comparisons with some other Ultimates. So let's put is brothers in the scene with him. So you've got Leonardo here, you've got Michelangelo here, and we have Raphael here. Make sure he's standing correct. So there you have all three of the turtles that have been released so far, and they look great together, man. I mean, when you just have one turtle, like for example, for ages I had just wave 1 because we were waiting for wave 2 to come out, and you know, just having one turtle, Raphael, was kind of, yeah, he's okay, but he just doesn't, you don't really get the real feel for them until you have, I say, at least 3 in your hand. Because like when I had just Raphael and Leonardo, yeah, it was still kind of okay, but it still felt like something was missing. But now we've got 3 turtles released, and you can really now start to get the feel for, okay, this is how this line is kind of going, and this is how these guys are going to look together. So that makes a big difference in terms of my personal enjoyment of these figures. So that's how Leonardo looks with Leo, Raph and Mike together. Now we're going to take a look at Leonardo and Master Splinter. So let's put Master Splinter in here. I think they look good together. Let's get Leo off the stand. Now I've got to say, on my particular figure, the joints aren't too loose, but there is I did have to warm him in warm water before I could get all the joints to be posable like this. So here we have Leonardo with his mentor Master Splinter. Let's make Leonardo stand up a bit straighter. Leo and Master Splinter. I think they look good together. Splinter looks pretty cool. I've got him with his bow and arrow here. And I'll talk about this toy in another review. It's actually quite cool. I didn't enjoy the vintage Splinter toy, but this one is a nice update of it. So let's put Leonardo with some enemies. You've got Leo here, a couple foot soldiers. Get these guys to stand up. Forgive me, this guy's foot's not flat. No pun intended. So there you have Leonardo with some foot soldiers, and the foot soldiers are crouched down, just like they are in the vintage toy line, but if you have them standing straight up, you can see they're quite tall versus the turtles, which is a good height ratio difference between the foot soldiers and the turtles. So there's a foot soldier there. You see what I mean here? So I think that's a good height contrast. So aside from that, oops, didn't mean to do that. Aside from that, other comparison I could do is let's put Leonardo's proper hand back in first before I go any further. Yeah, there's another comparison I can do, which is with the Neca comic book turtles, which I still have, although I customized mine to make them look a little bit more like the colour schemes of the vintage toys. So here's Leo again with his vintage sword, well, with his swords, not his vintage swords, his swords. Just standing up straight. Yeah, that's right. So if I get this figure down here, that's going to be a pain in the arse to reach that. Right, got it. So here we have the Neca Turtle from around 2008, and I customized these to look have different colour schemes. And for a while, these are the best turtles you could get. They're also sculpted by the Four Horsemen, which is something to take note of. But as you can see here, Leonardo has his swords, and they do have somewhat of a curve, but they don't have the same length. As you can see, they're not as long I should put this down. They're not as long as these swords on the newer Leonardo, the Ultimates Leonardo. See what I'm saying? So the katana blades on the Ultimate are really long, and as I said, that really does hurt the figure a bit. But what else am I going to do unless I customize these by recasting them, remolding, recasting and sanding? I may do that, but that's a lot of hassle that I shouldn't have to do for a toy that should, out of the package, come with the correct weapons, if that makes sense. So there's Leo with Leo. We'll put vintage Leo in there as well. Yeah, boy, this toy still got life in it, man. I think I got this in 1990. August 14th, 1990, I got this toy. Yeah, I remember things like that. It wasn't my birthday or anything, but it was just after spending so long searching for these toys to finally find them in the shops was like, wow. And I wasn't disappointed when I got home and played with them. So yeah, there's that. That's how those three look. And I've got one more Leonardo in my collection, which is this Mega Construx Leonardo, which I'll probably do some reviews of some Mega Construx stuff soon. But I just think it's great to have Ninja Turtles at Lego type scale, which fits perfectly with my Transformers Masterpiece collection in scale. It's brilliant. Brilliant. If he can actually stand up, if I get him to stand up. If I had a Lego piece underneath, it would probably stand better, but there you go. Come on. Boy, it's been difficult today. Right, let me fix this. Good grief. This guy just does not want to stand up. There we go. There we go, finally standing up. So there you have it. Ultimates, 2008 NECA, 1988/1989 Leonardo, and Mega Construx Leonardo in a classic toon style. So those are my Leonardos in my collection. Okay, so there is one more accessory that Leonardo comes with, which I actually forgot to mention, and it's this. The weapon sprue, which is a throwback to the vintage toy line. And the weapons are exactly the same as you get with the figure, except they're in a non-painted colour. So this is a, you know, if you want to have a vintage throwback, this could be cool, because this is the colour that the weapons originally came in. Although straight out of the package, I did notice that this sword is a bit warped, but it's quite thin plastic, so it shouldn't be too hard to straighten it if I were to ever want to use it. If I was to maybe heat it in some warm water, and then re-straighten it and then put some cold water on it, that should give it back its shape. But I don't think I'm going to be using these for the moment, although I have seen some customizers online take these same swords and maybe with a Dremel file it down so it's more straight. That could be something cool, but I think if I were to do that, I'd probably recast these first and use the cast rather than damage these. So just so you know, that comes with Leonardo as well, and I forgot to mention it. Okay, so with that, let's move on to our final thoughts, or my final thoughts. My final thoughts are this: if you grew up in the late 80s and early 90s playing with the Ninja Turtles toys, then these are really for you. You know, these are very well sculpted, very fun when you actually get them in hand to play about with. Yeah, the same old issues that I've said about the other figures still stands, such as it would be nice if they had double jointed elbows and double jointed knees. But aside from that, can't really go wrong with these, man. They're really good turtles. I think these are probably the best turtle figures out at the moment. I'm not really into NECA's stuff, because NECA's stuff does tend to have a reputation for breaking very easily, and also me personally, I much prefer the toy line than the cartoon. And I know that might be vice versa for other people. They may prefer the toon to the toys, But it's nice that we've got companies producing both styles, so you can find what's right for you. For me, the vintage toys is all the way. That's what's right for me. That's what I grew up with and what I wanted to have as an adult collector. But it's nice to have those options, and some people even like to mix and match styles, and I think that's cool. Just like with Transformers Masterpiece, it's nice to give buyers options so you can tailor make your own collection to suit your needs, because everybody's got different tastes. For example, some people may prefer the toy aesthetic, some people may prefer the toon aesthetic, but then you might have some people that prefer the comic aesthetic. And if you're a comic guy, these NECA 2008 turtles, be they black and white or be they with the all red headbands, those are great representations of the comic turtles. So ultimately it's nice to have some diversity and choices for collectors. So overall, I would say I'm very happy to have this TMNT Ultimates Leonardo, because Leonardo is my favourite turtle, and without him the toy line wouldn't be complete for me. So I'm very happy to have him, and I'm happy that for the most part there's more pros than cons. Cons, I'd say, are the shape of the swords is incorrect, and the paint on his belt is incorrect, and the belts are not removable. But other than that, I'm very happy with this figure, so I would certainly recommend him. So I hope that review's been helpful for you in making up your mind if you want to get this Leonardo. And yeah, with that, I think I've said all I have to say about this one, and it's on to the next review. So until then, take care, and I'll catch you on the next one, Lord willing.